Um, so it was more to control emotions. It's a surprise for everybody, except maybe to me.
For 11 months, he owned the top of the sport. Then, Ferrero finally reveals what Alcaraz felt the night Sinner took his world #1 ranking at Monte Carlo. It took a single, brutal night on court Rainier III to strip it all away. But the strangest part isn't that he lost the crown. It's what he felt behind closed doors afterward. Picture the execution, set point, the wind twisting sideways across the red clay. Carlos Alcaraz steps up for a serve he absolutely cannot miss. Toss, swing, double fault. It was over. The set, the tie-break, and minutes later, the world #1 ranking he'd defended for nearly a year vanished. Jannik Sinner threw his arms to the sky, and the throne changed hands right there on the dirt. The scoreboard was brutal, 7-6, 6-3, Sinner. 2 hours and 15 minutes of sheer agony. 45 unforced errors flew off the Alcaraz racket. A 2-0 lead in the first set, completely surrendered. A 3-1 lead in the second, blown. It didn't look like a standard loss, it looked like a total psychological collapse. The defending champion was dismantled on his favorite surface, handing his crown to the one man built to tear it away. So the media wrote the obvious narrative, the broken king. The night the pressure finally cracked a phenomenon. Broadcasters hunted for the slumped shoulders and the empty stare of a kid watching his kingdom walk out the door. Everyone leaned in to witness the heartbreak. It never came. When Alcaraz sat down in the locker room and actually spoke to his team, the words that came out didn't belong to a devastated man. They belonged to someone eerily calm, someone who had quietly made peace with this execution weeks before it even happened. He didn't sound robbed, he sounded ready. And the one thing that actually cut him to the bone had absolutely nothing to do with the world #1 ranking. That is the exact part we are breaking down today. The chilling confession everyone ignored, and the single hidden wound that hurt Carlos far more than losing his throne ever could. If you live for the raw, unfiltered truth behind the biggest rivalry in tennis, hit subscribe right now so you never miss an execution. Now, lock into the comments. What would you feel if your biggest rival stripped your legacy in front of a packed stadium? Rage or total numbness? Start with what he walked in carrying because it makes the ending stranger. Carlos Alcaraz arrived in Monte Carlo as the hottest player on the planet. Weeks earlier, he'd completed the career Grand Slam at the Australian Open, the youngest man in history to hold all 4 majors. He'd opened the season 16 wins and 0 losses. He came into that final 21-3 on the year. The defending champion at this exact event, an 8-time Masters 1000 winner walking onto his best surface, clay, his backyard. Both men arrived tied at 66 weeks each at #1, which made the math brutally simple. Winner takes the throne, loser walks away second. Both had won 26 tour-level titles, both were barely into their 20s. This was the rivalry that had swallowed the sport whole. Understand who was across the net. Jannik Sinner didn't just show up hot, he became the 3rd man in history after Djokovic and Nadal to win 4 straight Masters 1000 titles, and only the 2nd ever, after Djokovic in 2015, to sweep Indian Wells, Miami, and Monte Carlo in a single run. He walked in on a 17-match win streak, playing the best tennis of his life. Carlos wasn't facing an upset waiting to happen. He was facing a freight train with a crown as the prize. Then the coin landed wrong for him. Up in the stands sat Formula One's Charles Leclerc and George Russell, with the great Stefan Edberg courtside, a crowd that came to watch a coronation defended and saw a dethroning instead. Watch how it slipped away, because the details matter. Alcaraz broke first, a 2-0 lead in the opening set. He couldn't hold it. He fought to 6-5, serving with the set on his racket, and let it drift to a tiebreak. In that tiebreak, on set point, he double faulted, handed it over. Second set, same script, a 3-1 lead surrendered, Sinner reeling off the last 5 games of the match. 45 unforced errors by the end. The champion didn't get beaten so much as he came apart, point by point. In wind, he later said. Kept switching direction on him, never blowing one way, twisting, so one shot rode the breeze and the next fought it. 2 hours, 15 minutes, the handshake. Sinner's arms in the air, and the #1 ranking Carlos had held for all but 1 week since the previous US Open, gone. It was the 4th time in 2 years the top spot had passed between these two, and since Novak Djokovic's record 428-week reign ended in June 2024, no one else on earth had touched it. This is the moment the script calls for tears. The devastated quotes, the "I'm heartbroken," the "I let it slip." That's what a broken champion is supposed to say. He didn't say any of it. Alcaraz said the important points were where he lost it, that in the big moments he didn't play well. He talked about the chances he let go by. So many games, so many points, so many looks at 15-30, at love 30, that he never took. That was the frustration in his voice. Not the ranking, the execution. He was furious at the tennis, not the trophy. This wasn't sour grapes either, because the man who won said the same thing. Sinner, holding the trophy and the #1 ranking he'd just reclaimed, called the ranking secondary. Happier to land his first big title on clay than to sit back on top of the world. 2 champions, 1 night, and neither one measured it by the number. Then came the line that reframes the whole night. Losing #1 didn't blindside Carlos Alcaraz. He'd called it himself, out loud, on the record before the tournament even started. He said flatly that he was going to lose the top ranking. Maybe here, maybe the next event, but it was coming. And he explained why. He was defending more than 3,000 points from last season across Barcelona, Rome, and Roland Garros. That would be brutally hard to protect. And even if he held everyone, Sinner would keep piling on points at events where he had nothing to lose. That last part is the piece most fans never understood. The reason the math was so lopsided traces back to 2025, when Sinner served a 3-month suspension after a positive test that anti-doping authorities accepted was caused by accidental contamination. The ban cost him 0 Grand Slams, but it did erase 4 Masters 1,000 events, Indian Wells, Miami, and Monte Carlo among them. So in 2026, Sinner walked into those same tournaments with almost nothing to defend, while Alcaraz had a full season's haul on the line. Carlos wasn't guessing. He could see the rankings sliding before a ball was struck. He'd held it for all but a single week since the previous US Open. Sinner had briefly grabbed it back the past November, so he already knew this thing breathed in and out. He was never naive about it, and he didn't pretend to be now. And the calendar offered no mercy either. Barcelona, Rome, Roland Garros, a mountain of clay court points to defend, all while Sinner added and Carlos tried to hold. The throne wasn't being stolen in one night. It was leaking away over a whole swing, and Alcaraz had done the arithmetic weeks before anyone put a microphone in front of him. The story everyone told was a champion ambushed, robbed, cracked under pressure. The truth was a champion who saw the ending coming from a mile away and walked toward it with his eyes open. When he lost it, he wasn't mourning a shock. He was closing a chapter he already knew was ending. So what actually hurt? Read his words back, not the ranking. He'd released his grip on that weeks ago. The missed chances, the 15 to 30 points, the love 30 games, the version of himself that showed up for the big moments and didn't deliver. This is a player who built his name on the big moment, saving championship points, stealing matches that looked unwinnable. That night, the clutch gene went quiet. For Alcaraz, that's the real sting. Not the crown, the mirror. A ranking is a number that comes and goes. Leaving that much on the table against Sinner is the kind of thing that keeps a champion up at night. One honest counterweight matters too, and it should reassure every Carlos fan. This wasn't a changing of the guard, it was one clay final on a windy afternoon. Alcaraz still led their head-to-head, 10 wins to 7. He'd beaten Sinner in the biggest matches of the year before, Roland Garros, Rome, saving championship points along the way. And when it ended, he didn't sulk. He turned to Sinner at the trophy ceremony and told him, to his face, that what he was achieving was impressive. That only one man in history had ever won the Sunshine Double and Monte Carlo back-to-back, and now Sinner was the second. That's not a broken man. That's a rival who knows the war is long and this was one battle. Worse was coming. 2 days later, in Barcelona, Alcaraz's wrist gave out. The injury that would sideline him for months and freeze the comeback he'd stayed so calm about. The man who'd made peace with losing number one wouldn't even get the chance to chase it back right away. And by the time he could, Sinner had run off the first 5 Masters 1000 events of the season and defended Wimbledon. The ranking stayed gone far longer than one windy night, which only proves how clearly he'd read it coming, which is the thread nobody pulled that night. Everyone was so busy filming the funeral for a king that they missed what the king was telling them. He wasn't buried, he was recalibrating. The number that left him didn't define him, and he said as much. You just had to listen instead of reaching for the heartbreak angle. The throne changed hands in Monte Carlo, but it didn't get stolen. Carlos Alcaraz set it down himself, on purpose, weeks before Sinner ever lifted it, and told the world why, if only the world had been paying attention. Lay the real story next to the fake one and see how far apart they sit. The fake one, a champion shattered, a king cracked, a kid broken by the weight of losing number one. The real one, a guy who called his own ranking loss weeks in advance, walked into that final knowing the math and came out frustrated at the points he missed, not the crown he handed over. One of those is a highlight reel, the other is the truth, and Carlos said every word of it out loud. Look at what he actually carried out of Monte Carlo. Not devastation, a 10-7 head-to-head lead that still belonged to him, wins over Sinner in the biggest finals of the year before, and a clear head about a ranking that, in his own words, was always going to change hands on that clay. He lost a number, he didn't lose himself. That's the part the heartbreak headlines missed. The great ones don't measure a night by the trophy on the table. They measure it by the level they brought to it. Alcaraz walked away stung by his own missed chances and completely at peace with the ranking. And if you know how a champion's mind works, that should scare Sinner more than any tears ever would. A man who's already let go of the crown has nothing left to protect and everything to chase. If you want the real story under the headline, not the lazy one stamped on top of it, do me a favor and subscribe so the next one finds you. Then settle this in the comments and keep it simple. One word, just one. What did you really see in Carlos Alcaraz that night in Monte Carlo? Not what the cameras wanted, what was actually there? Heartbreak, relief, focus, denial? Give me your one word and tell me why. I'm reading every single one.